Hello, my name's Jorb. I love gear. We're talking today about the realistic concert mate MG-1, parentheses, by Moog Music. What is this, first and foremost? This is a Moog 2-oscillator monosynth plus a fully polyphonic organ in one very cool looking little box that was sold at Radio Shacks in the early 80s. I think 81 is when these were manufactured, and 82 or 3 is when they were sold. And they're cool and interesting and worth talking about for a few reasons today. First and foremost, this is about as cheap as you can get a vintage Moog. I think these are about $650 right now, or maybe $700, which I think is way too much for these. We'll talk about that later. But the closest thing I can think other than that is the Moog Rogue, and those are $800 or $1,000. And they share a lot of similar architecture, but the big difference, this is for the home market. It was sold at Radio Shack. Who shops at Radio Shack? Not necessarily musicians, normal motherfucking people. And so there's a lot of like quirks and weirdness about this because it was intended for the home market. A good example of that, the oscillators aren't called oscillators, they're called tone sources. And ring mod isn't called ring mod, it's called the bell tone. Okay? And another weird part of it being for the home market, this originally has RCA outs and ins. The ins were like a pass-through directly to the out, and the intention was plug this into your home stereo setup that you already have because you were an average consumer in the early 80s and you have a setup for records. And you, as a small child who shopped at a Radio Shack, can now play along to your favorite records. Isn't that sweet? Mine has been modified by me to have a quarter-inch out and the in currently doesn't do anything. The only other modification I've done, I increased the range of this master volume pot a little bit to get a little more gain. It distorts the sawtooths about 75%. I don't find it to be that pleasing, but I will show you very quickly. I said I don't find it to be very pleasing. That is wonderfully tubby. And on the square, just kind of gets louder. It doesn't distort at all. Okay, I'm going to turn off my space echo because it's kind of cheat mode. Making shit sound cool, and I'm going to get us back to a pretty normal sound. Now that we're on a very normal sound, I'm going to walk through each of these sort of module sections and explain how this works, talk about some of the nuance that makes it unique or different, or the controls that are lacking because it's for the home market, and maybe give you a better idea of what it might be like to own one of these or buy one of these. Chances are, if you're watching this, one showed up on your local Facebook or Craigslist or Reverb or eBay or whatever, and you're saying, yeah, I've seen those around, I don't know enough about them to know if it's worth my time or my money. Well, this is the video for you to watch. You'll get a pretty good idea of what it's like to interact with the synthesizer. And if you are a subscriber, I really appreciate you being here. We're super close to 4,000. That is something I never would have imagined possible. If you aren't subscribed, you like what you see here, maybe you want to check out some other stuff on my channel. This is featured in a video where I try and blindfold sound test, identify some Moog synthesizers. I really enjoyed that video. Pretty goofy, but and if you like it, I encourage you to subscribe. Okay, shall we begin? We're going to start not at the oscillators, at the mixer, but we're just going to do the first two now, tone source 1 and tone source 2, and these are labeled in red. How helpful. It brings us right over here to tone source 1 and tone source 2. We have a control over the octave of tone source 1. I'm going to let me set my scope to a better range here. There we go. This is tone source 1. We can set the octave there. We have two waveforms, sawtooth, which you've been hearing already. Sawtooth, which you've heard already. And a square with a fixed pulse width. I know on the scope it looks kind of angular, but your change in amplitude is what you hear. So we have two clear right-ish angles, and that's what makes it sound like a square. Tone source 2, as I bring it up in the mixer and bring down 1, has an octave range, which lets you get one octave higher and not as low as tone source 1. you have your octave control here, but you'll notice it's -1, 0, and +1. And so you can get one lower on tone source 1 and one higher on tone source 2, if that makes sense. They each have a range of 3 octaves, and they only cross over for 2. So your total range is 4. Is this a horrible visual? Okay, and you have a sawtooth and a square, but this one is a tighter pulse width, and that is not something you can modulate. But you also have this detune control, and so I'm going to bring tone source 1 back in and put them both on a sawtooth and put them on the same octave. There you go. They're so close in frequency that they're beating against each other. And you can, of course, tune 2 different intervals. Let's get them back in tune. You can see the faders are not that hard to be precise with. And for a 40-year-old instrument, it does an excellent job of staying in tune. I'm very impressed with that. Okay. One final thing, we have sync oscillator 2 to oscillator 1. And so what that does, every time oscillator 1 resets its wave, it tells oscillator 2 to reset its wave. So no matter what pitch this is playing at based on its settings, it'll reset and play the same pitch as tone source 1. Okay? And so if we bring tone source 1 down, but leave sync enabled, and then I move detune, you still hear the same, you're still hearing the same pitch, but you're changing the wave shape. And when it's lower than tone source 1, especially on a sawtooth like this, effectively what you get is just the very beginning of your sawtooth reset over and over and over, so it's quieter. And once we make it through 0 here, there we go, we start making sort of complex waves. Here, we're getting 1.5 sawtooths every time we reset. So you can get some pretty complicated waveforms. If we do it on the square and we put tone source 1 even lower, pretty cool. We'll do that with saw. This would be more fun if tone source 2 could have its pitch modulated separately from tone source 1. Okay, they're back in tune again. But again, this is for the home market, so there's a lot of little features that just didn't quite make the cut. Okay, we've talked about our oscillators, our tone sources. Shall we move on to the filter? And I'll go back to just tone source 1. This is a Moog 24 dB low-pass filter. With a little more resonance. And a little more resonance. And even more still. And a little more. And if we turn down tone source 1 and turn up keyboard tracking, we can play it like an oscillator, but let's get back to where we were. And there you go. It sounds good. I don't think it's exactly like other Moog ladder filters of the time, but I know there are modifications to make it closer in spec to something like the Mini Moog. Our last control here is contoured cutoff. Okay, and that is our envelope contribution. But look, again, we've got a lovely color coding. This goldish tan brings us up here to our contour generator. And our contour generator is a 2-stage envelope. And so this is what it's doing to our amp right now. Okay, but if I bring cutoff down and turn up our contoured cutoff, while our sustain is out, while the switch is out, it's just attack and decay. And our sustain is in, it's attack, sustain, and release. So it's a very simple ASR envelope, and this, again, here's our red color coding. Tone sources, this is your amp control. And contoured means the envelope controls our amp. Keyed is gated as long as I'm holding the key down. And continuous is continuous. It just stays open. Cool? And the idea of doing keyed versus contoured is when you do keyed, now you have a difference in the behavior over time of your amp and your filter. And so this is where we get our Moog style basses, and that's part of why people are still interested in these. You can get in a synthesizer from the 80s that does the Moog bass thing for not that much money. Cool. All right, there is our envelopes, and our filter, and our oscillator talked about. Let us move all the way over here to the modulation section. Keyboard glide is very simple. Keyboard glide, which isn't quite modulation, but we'll allow it. Use glide between. The longer it is, the longer it takes you to glide between pitches. I like it on a little bit. Okay, and then we have one LFO that they don't really call anything other than modulation, so maybe it's just a modulation generator. But it has three shapes, a triangle, and we're going to point to the filter so we can hear it. A square. And random. Which I think sounds great on the filter. You can also point that to the pitch of your tone sources. Here's our full range, and here's our square. And random. Turn that on just a little bit. Cool. We can also use our LFO to trigger as if it were a key press. And so it's just hitting the gate, and we get to change the pitch. And random still hits in time, which is unfortunate. They all do the same thing. The auto trigger. To quickly talk about the keyboard, it's fast and is last note priority, which is awesome. But your envelope generator does not reset until you release a key. And that's another thing, I believe there's a mod to make it retrigger every time. Over here on our mixer, we have noise. And keyboard tracking is on full. I'll use that to demonstrate this. Further up the keyboard, the brighter you get. But you can, of course, mix that in with your two tone sources. And then also we have bell tone, which is a ring modulator, or a ring modulator output. And that is your ring modulation. You're modulating the amplitude of your oscillator with one oscillator with another one. And since it's happening at audio rates, you get pretty wacky sounds. Space Echo again. Distracted for a while. Okay, Space Echo's off. We're back to learning mode. If you're keen-eyed, you'll notice there's one more fader in this mixer. It's called Polyphony, and what that is a fully polyphonic organ sound. So, to listen. Doesn't sound super great. You can see on the oscilloscope. It is just square waves, and they don't look unlike the square waves we have for our regular oscillators, but they're different and they sound different. And they do go through the filter. Which can be controlled by the LFO and can be controlled by our envelope. But you'll notice it isn't taking the contour generator of the amplitude, not exactly. It will do... Actually, let's get all this wackiness with the filter gone. It will do the attack stage, or the rise stage, but it won't do the fall time. It's like the keyboard... It's like the keyboard can't remember what was just held. Okay. But it does sound pretty cool. And cheat mode on. I'm turning the Space Echo on again. Oh, and sorry, if you didn't notice, you can't modulate the pitch of the polyphony at all. You can tune it separately up here, but... I think it sounds pretty interesting, if not like a cool polyphonic synth, like, you know, kind of like a Baldwin Fun Machine type of an organ, right? Anyway, you can use that as a sort of third oscillator. And we're going to bring everything into the mixer now, the noise, the ring modulator, the polyphony, and both tone sources. Fine. And I'll turn off my Space Echo. This is huge. You can hear that it's huge. Space Echo back on. So there you go. That's kind of a 1,000-foot look at a lot of things the MG-1 can do. I like it quite a lot. I can't justify keeping it. It's worth too much money. It does have CV in and gate in, but the gate is a shorting trigger. What that means is you're connecting your tip and your sleeve of the 1/4-inch jack instead of just sending a voltage there. That is not compatible with the gate out on my MPC, so I don't have a good way to use it. But the CV does work. And you might have an easy way to do S triggers, so maybe you can use the CV and gate and then sequence this externally, which would be really, really rad. I'm doing this video because I want to sell this. I really like to document things before I send them on because this might be the video that convinces somebody to or to not get this, and that is where I think I can provide a lot of value. Is demonstrating these things. I think I'm not half bad at that, and you know, maybe this will give somebody enough information to inform their purchase. So there you go. I like the MG-1. I do think they're cool. I do think they sound good. So quirks about buying one, they're too expensive right now. If you ask me, you want to wait, or if you can get one broken and fix it up, highly recommend it. They have this black foam in and around all the faders that gets gummy and deteriorates over time. And if yours hasn't had it removed, chances are it's going to need it because that black foam will drop onto the circuit board and gum things up there, or get stuck in the controls, maybe short some components out on the board. Which is horrible. I'm not going to keep this one. If you want a synthesizer in general, you want a monosynth period, I would not recommend this. If you want to try vintage Moog, see what all the fuss is about, this is a wonderful way to try it, and it does sound very good. I cannot argue with that. If you're just a little curious about these, the prices they're going for, I don't think they're worth it right now. But a good deal is always a good deal, so if you find one, you should take it. Alrighty, I'm going to put on some droning sounds and fade out. I really appreciate you watching. My name's been Jorb. I love gear. That includes the realistic concert mate MG-1, parentheses by Moog Music. I hope this was of value to you. Hope you stick around. Hope I can see you in the next one. Hope you have a good day. I love gear. I hope you do too. I'll see you in the next one.